Hey guys, and welcome back to another Lost Bits video right here on TetraBitGaming, the series where we explore the unused, altered, and unseen content in gaming. Nearly 13 years after its initial release, despite aging pretty well graphically, Sonic Generations recently got a remake alongside some extra content featuring Shadow. And with this release, I wanted to finally hop into the original game and cover it here on this series. We got lots to go through, including some pre-release changes, unused graphics, and more. So spin dash into that like button below. It's time to munch on some chili dogs and find some Sonic Generations Lost Bits. Alright, so for starters, it looks like before the game was finalized with the title Sonic Generations, it originally had a working title of Sonic Anniversary instead. And according to a leaked Sega internal document, there were also apparently some plans for there to be a collector's edition of the game with, quote, all old Sonic games on one disc, with the PS3 version also getting some extra content as well. Of course, neither of these ended up happening, and how far all old Sonic games would have stretched remains unknown, as old is a relative term. Would this just entail all mainline 2D Sonic games? Every single game ever, including arcade and handheld games? Who knows? Then another plan for this game, which was seemingly scrapped, is for Sonic Generations to have also been released on the Nintendo Wii, DS, as well as PSP. As according to this article on Sonic Paradise, allegedly at Game Fest of 2010, Sega staff, believed to have been the marketing and communications director at the time, mentioned that the game would release on PS3, PSP, DS, and Wii, and this also predated when the game got the go-ahead to be released on the Xbox 360. Now this was before the 3DS was released, so the DS version was likely reworked for the 3DS, but yeah, the PSP and Wii versions of the game I guess just never came to be. And what's extra cool is that in 2017, a backup of a very old PSP build of the game dating back to late 2009 was actually obtained by Obscure Gamers, a group dedicated to preserving games. And although the disc was damaged and most of the disc's data was irrecoverable, what was salvageable was pretty awesome, including a few leftover level assets, some UI graphics, remnants of a debug menu, and what I think is the most interesting, an old logo for the game with its original name. Now, moving things forward a little, on June 23rd, 2011, around 4 months before the game's initial release, a demo of Sonic Generations was released. And if you're a big Sonic fan, you'll probably know that June 23rd is the anniversary date of Sonic the Hedgehog's original release date on the Sega Genesis. And this happened to be the 20th anniversary. And for some reason, somebody thought it would be a cool and clever idea for this demo to only be available and playable for 20 days following release. So after 20 days had passed, the demo essentially just became a trailer. Now there are apparently still some ways to play this demo if you happen to still have it downloaded on an Xbox 360 or PS3, but I don't and I couldn't figure out how to emulate it, so thankfully there's also a restoration mod for the Steam version of the game, that's also unlisted now, which I'll be using for demonstrative purposes here. Anyways, normally, while it was originally still playable, this demo only allowed the player to play through Green Hill Act 1 and only as Classic Sonic. And I emphasize normally, as leftover unused in this demo was Modern Sonic, who is oddly referred to as Generic Sonic in the game's code, as well as all of Green Hill Act 2 for Modern Sonic, essentially revealing that this demo was almost the same as the one that was released closer to the game's final release, which did have both levels and both Sonics. And I guess since these were left over in the 20-day demo, it seems like it was artificially made shorter. And as you can see in these very old recordings of the game, these leftovers could actually still be re-enabled through some hacking. And this demo build actually has some more leftover content that went unused, both in the demo itself as well as it not making the cut in the final game either. First, found amongst various other UI assets is a slightly different life icon of Sonic's head, where its gradient uses some brighter blues. And apparently, this early version was seen in some early teasers for the game. Then next, there are actually leftover sprite sheets of both Sonic as well as Robotnik in their OG Genesis style. And apparently, these were planned to have appeared on the game's loading screen before I guess the decision was made to change it to the silhouettes of both of the Sonics running, as is seen in the final version of the game. And although Robotnik is only seen running and stopped here, Sonic's sprite sheet has him doing pretty much everything he can do in Sonic 1, including his foot-tapping waiting pose, looking up, jumping, running, taking damage, and more. Now, apparently, by modifying this demo into a dev mode, Sonic's walking sprites can be seen on the loading screen, and this would make sense for a loading screen, so I doubt the rest of these sprites here were intended for that same purpose, and this is just a full sheet. And then lastly for this demo build are actually a whole bunch of unused assets, including some placeholder graphics, as well as even some leftovers from Sonic Unleashed. We got various number fonts, as well as UI text for various other things like results and status, one with pass time, take photo, and talk use text. There's a sheet for various warning signs, including arrows, Sonic's shoe, as well as a bomb. And then we also have a separate graphic warning of that bomb in a yellow triangle. Then, left over from Sonic Unleashed, we have some assets seemingly left over from its world map. We have the sun and moon medal icons, as well as the life counter icon for both regular Sonic as well as his werehog form. And then there are also several unused graphics that were seemingly used as placeholders, including an event setter tile, a grouper, one for environmental sounds just featuring a pair of 16th notes. There's a switch manager tile, these swooshes which based on their file name were associated with saving, and then we have two placeholder tiles with some Japanese text on them. This yellow one translates to hint, so I'm thinking it was probably a placeholder for OMOCHAO's trigger points. And then the text on this red tile translates to target, so perhaps it was a placeholder for the target reticle thing that appears when Sonic uses his homing attack. Now, all of these that I mentioned so far are left over in this demo, but a number of them are also left over unused in the release build of the game too, specifically these ones here. Next up, there's a sheet of several icons for the game's skills, which you can buy in the final game, but you can't do that in this demo, so they go unused here, as well as we got icons for each of the supporting characters seen in the game, like Tails, Knuckles, Amy, etc. Now that's about it for the demo build, so now let's switch gears and chat about the release version. First, specifically the 3DS version of the game, which actually has quite a few assets left over unused. In addition to some leftover debug fonts, there are some other early and testing assets, including a pair of graphics titled Text Test. We got this little bit of Japanese text, which translates to return, as well as this early menu where some more differences can be seen in the background design, and then it looks like there's also a placeholder graphic being seemingly used as a life counter at the top here, with the Japanese Kari slapped over Sonic's head here, translating to temporary. And then in addition to those, there's also this sheet of assets that seem to have been used as an early placeholder for the game's boost gauge. Then following these, we have this 1990 icon, which looks the same as the other year labels that are used in the game's collection room, but since there weren't any Sonic games released in 1990, this goes unused. Then, going with the other test sprites, there's actually also an unused test model found in the game titled Sky Sphere, which, yeah, based on the name and these directional labels here, this appears to have been a model used for testing a skybox. Next, there's this Coming Late 2011 graphic, which is a leftover from the demo of the game that was shown off at E3 in June of 2011. And then speaking of E3, there are also several 3D test images left over in the 3DS version of this game, one of which is a pair of images taken of what looks to be the Sega booth that was set up at E3 2011. And in addition to this, there are also pairs of images taken of some Sonic figures in various poses and at different angles. And yeah, these were all very likely taken at slightly different angles in order to test the 3DS's stereoscopic 3D feature. And then lastly for the 3DS version, saving the absolute best for last, left over in the game is also an unused green square. And now for the last section here, let's finally get to the release version of the game most played on the PS3, Xbox 360, and PC. And to shake things up a bit, let's chat about some unused audio. First up, we have what sounds to be an alternate version of the Green Hill theme that's heard when you stand near the level in the white space area, where instead of the violins and other instruments heard in the final version, it seems to use more synthy sounds. Let's give it a listen. And yeah, based on the file name, this looks to have been a placeholder track for Green Hill Zone in the hub area. Next, we have an unused invincibility theme for Modern Sonic. Now this track goes unused here for the simple fact that there aren't any invincibility power-ups in any of the modern Sonic stages. Next up, there's an unused track that was planned to have played whenever the time break ability is used in the game. And despite being unused in the game, it even made it into the official soundtrack for this game. And this track is also actually a remix of a track titled Cybertrack from another Sonic game I covered recently, Sonic Advance 3. And yeah, it's unclear why this song doesn't get played in the game, and instead of it being heard, there's no special music used for the time breaks. Next, there's actually a track that was apparently also unused in Sonic Adventure, went on to get used in Sonic Adventure 2, and now returns to the series in its unused state here in Sonic Generations. And based on its file name, it was meant to have been used as a fanfare for getting a 1-up in the game. Then next up, although not heard in the game as part of Silver's theme, strangely, and for reasons unknown, there's a section of the song that's separated into a second file titled Versus Silver Part 2. And this second bit is also actually heard in the soundtrack version of the theme as well. Here's the section that was separated. And yeah, it's unclear what this part 2 was meant to have been, but I'm thinking maybe for a second phase or something. And then lastly, for the audio stuff, there's actually a whole ton of sound effects and voice clips that go unused as well, some of which are left over from previous games in the series. The unused sound effects include stuff like a fanfare for apparently doing a trick, one for apparently a grind rail breaking, a jump-like sound, which based on a part of its file name referencing a cannon of some sort may have been related to that. There's a bubble sound effect, some sort of hint sound effect, some for spring pads, panels of some sort, and one that sounds like a sound effect for selecting something. Then for the enemy side of things, we have unused sound effects for the spiny enemies seeking, turning, as well as charging, There's a glitchy sound for the buzzer enemies shooting out a projectile, a punch-like sound effect meant for enemies in the Crisis City stage. We got an unused heartbeat sound effect found amongst those for classic Sonic's rival and boss battles. Then we got a pair of unused roars from Time Eater. And then lastly, we have some unused sound effects for the gun hunters, as well as the gun truck. For the gun truck, we have an unused projectile sound effect, which sounds absolutely way too weak for something that this menace of a truck would shoot out. And then for the hunter, we have absolutely the most annoying beeping sound effect I've heard in a while, apparently meant for charging up an attack. You've been warned. And then, in addition to all of those sound effects, there are copious amounts of unused voice lines from the game's supporting cast of characters meant for the final battle against Time Eater. Now, in the interest of time, I'll only play the clips from a few of the characters for each instance, as otherwise, I think it would get extremely repetitive. But if you're interested in listening to them all, I'll have the wiki page linked in the description below with all of my sources. Anyways, these unused voice clips include the characters suggesting to Sonic that the Time Eater's core looks like its weak point.
That round core looks like its weak point.
That round core is its weak point. Looks like that glowing core is its weak point.
That round core is its weak point.
Instructing the player to rotate the left stick to escape the restraint traps in the fight.
Quickly rotate the left stick to get away. Quickly rotate the left stick to escape.
Quickly rotate the left stick to escape.
Instructing Sonic to attack Time Eater by pressing the X button on the PS3 or A button on an Xbox controller.
Sonic, attack with the X button! Sonic, attack with the A button!
And then also the characters telling the Sonics to switch out with each other to dodge an attack.
Switch and get out of the way!
Switch and get out of the way!
Switch! Switch!
And also, as a small aside, since we're talking about the Time Eater battle, found amongst the files for Time Eater, there's also this graphic featuring the names of a bunch of the game's characters. And no, I didn't accidentally flip this image horizontally. For whatever reason, this is just how it's found. And what's extra interesting about these is that in addition to all of the characters that do have dialogue in the final battle, we also have graphics here for OMOCHAO and Metal Sonic, amongst the rest, even though they aren't heard from at all in this fight. Then after this, we also have some scrapped dialogue lines only for specific characters, including Silver,
It's not over yet!
Modern Sonic scoffing, as well as for Eggman.
What are you doing? I'm right here!
And then last but not least for the unused voice lines, I hope you don't get annoyed by OMOCHAO's voice, because there are a lot of unused voice clips for the fella. Like, a lot. So again, in the interest of time, I won't play all of them here, but I'll pick out some of the ones which I found more interesting. And yeah, as you'd expect, most of these are just a bunch of scrapped tutorial messages for the player, but some also offer insight into some of the game's levels, items, objects, and enemies. Anyways, I hope you're ready for some OMOCHAO.
Press the square button multiple times to launch a faster spin dash. Press the left bumper or right bumper to move left or right quickly. Use the left stick to move while skydiving at low speed. Call on Blaze to extinguish the walls of flame for you. You'll need her help to reach the goal. This is the wrong way. I think you need to go right. Attack! Egg launchers can fire missiles that home in on you, so watch out. These platforms are crumbling. You'd better hurry on ahead. If you get too close to flame funnels, you'll be sucked inside. Jump over the clock hands and head for the opening in the middle of the clock. Grabbers are hard to get away from, so try not to get caught. Grab hold of a rocket and it will take you to a different area. That's a star post. When you lose a life, you'll start again from the last star post you passed.
Then, moving along, we also got some unused text for all 5 of you Unused Text fans out there. First, there are actually some unused text descriptions for the two wisps that can be seen and used in the Planet Wisp stage, meant to have been seen in the game's skills list. The descriptions are pretty basic, so I don't think we really missed out on much with these. For the orange wisp, the description would read, "Turns Sonic into an orange rocket to fly up." And then for the pink wisp, "Turns Sonic into pink spikes, cling to surfaces." And you might have also noticed the wisp icons amongst the rest of the skills in the sprite sheet I mentioned earlier in this video. So the unused text descriptions and those icons seem to strongly suggest that the wisps were once planned to be purchasable skills in the shop, which if we go by something like the skateboard skill, which lets you hop on the skateboard whenever, these might have allowed the player to use the wisp abilities on any stage or something. Then another interesting bit of unused text relates to some seemingly meant for a supersonic entry in the art room's characters section. It would have read, "The name given to Sonic's ultimate form when he is transformed through the power of the Chaos Emeralds. Sonic is more powerful than normal as Supersonic, but he can remain so for only a short time due to the tremendous amount of energy required." It's currently unknown why Supersonic's appearance in this section was cut from the game. Now real quick, if you're enjoying the video and would like to help support the channel and get some extra perks, consider becoming a channel member today. Click the join button below the video for some more info, and a big thank you to anyone that joins. Anyways, next, although the Sega Genesis controller skill that when purchased allows the player to actually play the original Genesis release of Sonic the Hedgehog in the game only appears in the Xbox 360 and PS3 versions of the game, interestingly, despite not being normally obtainable, the shop icon for it, the Hub World model, as well as the unique Hub World music track for it are actually still left over normally unused in the PC version. And while on the topic of skills, there's also an unused icon left over of Sonic's Super Peel-Out, suggesting that the devs had at least some plans to include the move here in Generations, likely for classic Sonic. Now we've already explored various unused assets here in Generations that were left over from previous Sonic games, but there's actually quite a few more. Found amongst the game's logos for the game's music collection are actually logos for Sonic Battle in both English and Japanese, suggesting that at one point there may have been some plans to include another track or two from Sonic Battle, or at the very least, plans for the remastered version of Emerald Beach, which is heard in some challenge acts to have been available in the collection room. Then, in addition to all of the other Sonic Unleashed leftovers we've already gone over, there are a few more things, including an unused move from that game, the Foot Sweep. And what's extra interesting is that there's leftover functionality for this move too, so it can actually still be re-enabled in the game. Then after this, there are several images of character renders from Unleashed, including Tails, Amy, Eggman, Chip, as well as a pair for Sonic in both his regular and Werehog form. Now it's believed that these were meant to have been used during an installation process for the game of some sort. And then to add to these, there's also leftover mission UI assets where all we see is Sonic's life count and a lap counter that's 0 out of 0. And then lastly, for the leftover stuff from Sonic Unleashed, although there isn't any sort of functional debug menu left over in Generations here, there are actually numerous sprites left over from one from Sonic Unleashed. These include various things like some X icons, checkboxes, arrows, a pair of Sonic heads with one even featuring the word debug right on it, and more. And interestingly enough, many of these graphics were actually seen in an old screenshot of what looks to be an early version of Sonic Unleashed, which was shown off at CEDEC of 2008, a game developer conference that's held in Japan. And honestly, I think this was pretty cool to see. I just wish something like this was left over in Generations here as well. Then, although not necessarily a leftover from Sonic Colors, there's actually an environment map in the game which, if we look closely, each of the images here appear to be of Sonic in what looks to be Planet Wisp. And although the resolution of these images certainly leaves much to be desired, if we look closely enough, we can also notice a red 3D rotation tool around Sonic, suggesting that these screenshots may have been taken while using a debug mode or stage editor of some sort. Now, I looked around the map and I couldn't find where this environment map could have been used, and I even asked some members of the Sonic modding community and they also couldn't find where it was used. But if you may know, let us know down in the comments. And now, last up for this video, there are actually a few animations left over in the game that go unused too. The first of which are several of classic and modern Sonic's boost gauge meant for the final battle against Time Eater. These include animations of the gauge simply sliding to the right, modern Sonic's gauge filling, classic Sonic's filling, the player switching either to classic Sonic or switching to modern Sonic, and then an animation of the gauge sliding in and then starting to glow. And unlike all of the rest, this one doesn't have the Xbox Y button on it. And then to wrap things up, there are also 2 unused animations for Mr. Miles Tails' Prower, and these aren't anything super crazy, as they're just of Tails simply walking as well as running. Now, it's not 100% clear where these were meant to have been used, but since similar animations were used in the game's cutscenes, these may have been early or alternate animations for those instances. And we'll wrap it up there for Sonic Generations, and I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, check out some of my other Sonic Lost Bits videos, and be sure to subscribe and ring the notification bell to find your way back to the channel in the future. And as always, thank you all so much for stopping by today, and I will see you in a bit.